More bombshell revelations are coming out of Fauci's emails. But there's one thing that no one's talking about. It's the elephant in the room, and it threatens every single one of us. Stick with me, and let's take a deep dive on today's show. Welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Holthouse, coming to you live from the heart of America, Columbus, Ohio. I hope everyone's doing well. We're going to continue the Fauci Gate saga on today's show, which seems to continue to unravel as more information comes out. But the main topic today that we're going to build up and get to at the end of the show is what's everyone not talking about? What's the real threat here? Does it really matter if this virus came from a lab or didn't come from a lab? What's the bigger picture? And why are people avoiding it? Even a lot of the mainstream media, some of the more conservative mainstream media aren't talking about this. We're going to dig into it in today's show, which I'm very excited about. So, of course, I want to first start off, as usual, with seeing where everyone's coming from. I see Sandy Brown. Good morning to you, too. It's good to see you. I'm not going to try to pronounce your name, but the person from France, nice to see you. Thank you for joining. Fort Bend, Texas. Melita from Italy, thank you. I see Quality Contact asking a quick question about shedding. I won't get into that on this channel or on YouTube. I would recommend actually looking at Brighteon.com. It's Mike Adams' site. It's Brighteon, Brighteon.com. That is a place I really recommend if you're doing a little bit of research on the thing that they're giving everybody to fix the thing, right? That I can't talk about on here. So anyway, I'd recommend Brighteon.com or even going to Rumble. But like I said, Brighteon.com, great place to do research on what's really happening with the thing I can't talk about. So, great to see everybody. We got Dearly from West Virginia. Cynthia, nice to see you again, coming from Michigan. Vicky from Kentucky. Again, thanks everyone for joining. It's great to be here. I hope you've all had a wonderful weekend, and it's good to be back here and talking about these things because there's a lot unfolding today. And I think that for those of you who've been following along since the beginning of my channel with where we've gotten to today, a lot has changed. We've had a lot of letdowns, but at the same time, there's just so much hope. And even today's story, today's narrative, it goes to point out that there still is so much hope. And I think because fundamentally, they're losing control of the narrative. And that's the thing, is that's how they've maintained control, is through the narrative that's trapped everyone. And as for all of us, and as for you watching, our job is to help our fellow Americans, and I guess really fellow global citizens, be freed from the control of that narrative, to step away from the mainstream media, the mockingbird media, and just to see what's really happening and become empowered and step out of the grips of fear. And the more we look into these things, the more and more you're going to see the truth coming out. So I see Joe Panther asking about AMC in China. I'm not a big, stock guy. For a long time now, I put my money into precious metals. I don't mess around with the stock market or digital currency, just me. I'm a little more old school. I'd rather have ammunition and gold. But I see one thing about China and AMC. It is interesting timing to look at what's happening with AMC because, as far as I know, if I'm not mistaken, China is the majority shareholder of AMC. So just something to be a little bit weary of with the whole AMC thing, which is just kind of suspicious. So anyway, so stepping into what are we going to talk about today, right? So there's some interesting things going on with Fauci, but as I mentioned, Fauci is he's just the pawn. He's just this low-level person. But if you look at what's behind him and what's coming out, we can trace things back, I think, to the origin of this and the origins not only of the virus, but of the intentions of the virus. I mean, who said make a virus that we can use? Like, who's behind this with what's happening? All right. So let's dig into that. So I'll first want to jump into the first thing I want to bring up here is actually an email that came out. I'm just going to show you that this, I mean, to me, this is what you'd say, irrefutable evidence of the origin of this, and more so the involvement of Fauci and NIH and NIAID, NIAID. To me, it's irrefutable. So let's just take a look at this. I'll full screen this for you. So what this is an email, one of the emails that has come out in the email gate, Fauci email gate. This is from someone written to Anthony Fauci, where he says thanks in receipt of this. And it's somebody reviewing. So this was an email that was sent April 3rd, 2020. If you haven't heard of this gentleman, Daszak, I think it's Peter Daszak, he's the person that's overseeing one of the main labs, or I guess you'd say, companies that's the U.S. is getting a lot of funding to, and he's the person that is basically distributing these and putting his money into Wuhan and overseeing more directly what is happening in Wuhan. So this email here says the entire amount of the new Daszak grant, year 6 funded in I think fiscal year 19, is about $3.64 million. The total amount that will go to Wuhan Institute of Virology under this grant will be about $750,000. And they're saying that $76,000 has already been sent to Wuhan in year 1, according to the NOA. They also mention the bat sampling work mentioned in the article during the years 2011 to 2015. Who was in office in America in 2011 and 2015? Could that have been perhaps Obama working together with Fauci on these things? I don't know. Perhaps. Was probably supported by years 1 through 5 of the Daszak grant, but could have been supported by a different program, also funding the Wuhan Lab. Right. So here we go. I mean, look, if you are questioning the overall fact of, as Rand Paul has, is he allowing money and finances to flow into Wuhan for gain of function research, which that's what that is, right? They're talking about the bat sampling work, that's gain of function research. That's research done in China to see whether they can turn these viruses and basically create a new virus that could be unleashed and used, right? Yeah, which we know where that goes. So this is, I mean, look, to me, this is, you can't look past this. I mean, Fauci lied to Congress about whether he was funding Wuhan, and this is direct proof with a response from Fauci saying thanks, an acknowledgement from Fauci. So again, it's pretty damning evidence, but to me, this is just the small part. This is the small part. Now I'm going to say one thing before I jump in. Is this the reminder to hit like and share this? I also see, I want to quick shout out to MAGA 2020 and JT Wild. JT Wild is an amazing musician that I met while at the God and Country in Texas. So JT Wild, it's so good to see you on here. He's got a great beard, actually, Mr. JT Wild. So good to see you on here. Okay, but just a quick reminder, YouTube, as you know, they don't like me. They don't like anybody that tells the truth these days. So the more you help spread this, the more you can hit, like button, make sure you're subscribed, anything you can do to share. That's really, really helpful. Actually, the last live show I did, which was the one on Fauci, which was the fall guy, that video was my most popular live video I've ever had, except for the first one I went live. So what you are doing and sharing this with your friends, sharing it with your colleagues or family, it's really helping to get this message out, because as I mentioned already, they control us. When I say they, it's the elites, the evil, all the different words we use to describe them. They win and they succeed by keeping us all like this, by keeping us blindfolded through mainstream media, Hollywood, etc. And what we're doing together, as you say, as the digital soldiers, is we are bypassing that. We're waking up our fellow fellow humans to step out from under this tyranny that they've had over us for a very, very long time, a very, very long time. Also, a reminder, I'm now live streaming in a lot of different places, but I want to call out Rumble specifically because if you don't have a Rumble account, I highly, highly recommend that you go start an account there, follow me. I put the links to that below in the description. And just because, look, YouTube, I could disappear any day off of YouTube. I do see someone also asking, yada, 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 the best place to donate. I would recommend just going directly to my website, maninamerica.com. There's a little place where you can contribute down below. I really do appreciate that. YouTube takes a big cut, but on my website, that's the place if you do want to support me, and I really do appreciate that. And finally, if you want to follow me and keep up to date, I do recommend following me on either Telegram or SafeChat, and the links should be below as well. So diving back into what's going on with Fauci and China and all this, let's start looking deeper, because there's a lot of this story that is not adding up, and there's also there's a part of this story that no one's touching. Very few people are touching, which baffles me, but we're going to get into that. Okay, so looking back to the content here, so let's look at the next article here, right? So this is on Becker News. Now, again, this is more proof coming out. He's saying scientists believe they have smoking gun for Wuhan gain-of-function research causing COVID-19. Something I just want to read to you quickly, okay? It says the Wuhan Lab Conspiracy is on the verge of becoming a conspiracy fact. Scientific researchers who have peeled open the RNA structure of the novel coronavirus believe they have detected genetic sequences that are almost certainly unnatural. So this is interesting because the Wall Street Journal, which I don't have much hope in a lot of the mainstream media, appears to have cracked the case on Sunday. So they put an article out saying that researchers believe that the sequences could not have been, could not have arisen from nature. And all the speculation from bat soup and wet markets were the originators aside. The essay in the Wall Street Journal says that, quote, much of the public discussion has focused on circumstantial evidence, mysterious illness in late 2019, the lab's work intentionally supercharging viruses to increase lethality, known as gain of function. The Chinese Communist Party has been reluctant to release relevant information, it adds, and reports based on U.S. intelligence have suggested the lab collaborated on projects with the Chinese military. But what they're saying in this is in the Wall Street Journal article, is that the most compelling reason to favor the lab leak hypothesis is firmly based in science. In particular, consider the genetic fingerprint of CoV-2, the novel coronavirus responsible for the disease COVID-19, the report added. So again, I'm not trying to dig into these things and look at trying to prove to you that this came from a lab, right? And this is what bothers me about the mainstream narrative right now, is all of the discussion is looking at, did this come from a lab or didn't it come from a lab? No one's looking at the fact that, which I'll get into, that the Chinese military published a book in 2019 about the weaponization of a coronavirus, basically to start World War III. No one's talking about the things that are in the background, the bigger picture reasons. No one's talking about, why was Obama working together with Fauci on this, right? Here's another article I want to pull up. This was back in April 2020, but this is, again, we can't ignore these things, right? So this is going to sound old because this is back in April of last year. President Donald Trump said Friday that he will end federal funding for the Wuhan Institute of Virology that some are claiming spawned the coronavirus. And at the daily coronavirus task force news conference, the president was asked why the NIH would include the Chinese laboratory in a $3.7 million stipend to conduct research. Okay, now what Trump said is, quote, the Obama administration gave them a grant of $3.7 million. I've been hearing about that. We've instructed that if any grants are going to that area, we're looking at it literally about an hour ago and also early in the morning. Okay, so here, this is back, if you recall, when the virus was first kind of coming out, and President Trump was having all of his daily task force meetings, which were kind of funny because even CNN was showing these things. I remember at that time thinking, "Gosh, this is kind of brilliant on Trump's behalf," because here he's bypassing all the mainstream media, is talking directly to people, which the media hated for that. But again, why is it that Obama was allowing this, right? So, because obviously we see that in that picture, you've got Obama and Fauci. So this research was starting back under Obama, and who knows how much longer before that. I mean, Fauci, which I won't get into it today, but Fauci has a long history and a very shady past. Actually, you can find old pictures of him with there's one picture in particular, which I should have showed it to you. I think I showed it in a previous episode of him. He's standing at some kind of elite party with the Rockefellers, and there's all these other folks. I think Bill Gates Sr. was there, and he's just a younger man at that point. So he has a very checkered past, which I'm not going to get into in this because right now I want to look at what's happening currently, right? What's happening right now. Okay. So again, we have this virus that was unleashed, right? And which now they're looking at, they're not even talking about was it intentionally released. They're looking at, was this created in a lab or not? Okay. But to me, this is what's the bigger picture behind this, and what's Fauci's involvement. I know that in the previous show, we talked about Fauci as being the fall guy, right? Which that's my stance on Fauci. He's just a pawn, right? As I mentioned before, it's if there are people that are in control and they're at the top controlling things, the people that we see down here they're just the pawns. They're going to be sacrificed as soon as they need to be sacrificed. And a lot of times, if you look at how fall guys work, which I talked about in the last episode, it's what they want to do is they want to build this story up, build all the hype so they can pin everything on that one person. And then once that person falls, they're hoping that the story disappears, right? This is what you had happening in Watergate. They had the five people, the burglars that had broken in to I think it was the Democratic National Headquarters, if I'm not mistaken, and the trials, everything was about focusing on them, right? Everything was focusing on these people instead of looking at, hey, was the president involved in this by chance? And it was through the work of the reporters, which somehow were actually honest reporters at that time. They're not all, they weren't all sold out at that time. They actually were looking into this in the mainstream media, and that's how they broke the story, right? So what's Fauci's involvement with China? What's the overall plan? What's happening? Why are we in this situation? Well, I think it was yesterday. I'll pull this up and show you what Mr. President Trump, God love him, such a fantastic man. There's a lot of exciting things that he's working on, which his social media is coming out this summer. That's been confirmed. So that makes me really, really excited and happy. But let's look at what Trump is saying about this. This was yesterday, Monday, and that President Donald Trump slammed both Anthony Fauci and China for their roles in the coronavirus pandemic. In an interview on Monday, he stated that Fauci's released emails suggest the doctor was in the pocket of China. He says, quote, "You look at his emails, they are really horrible. He was in the pocket, it would seem. We're all smart people. He was in the pocket of China. The way he pandered to them and the way he dealt with them." So this is something that I've found with Trump is a lot of times he knows a lot more, but he just kind of drops out these things. He just gives out these dribbles of things. Of course, that's what Trump would understand what the real story was behind Fauci. And I remember even when Trump had Fauci on his leading the task force against this and as his main kind of spokesperson, I remember thinking, why, right? Why is Trump using this guy? This guy's he's a criminal, right? If you look into his past, his involvement with AIDS, all these things, he has his past. So why is Trump having him up there? And there's a reason for these things. And so, of course, like I remember when they first brought up the Wuhan funding, Trump acted surprised. He's kind of like, oh, wow, we're funding Wuhan? Like, let's look into that. We're just talking about that an hour ago. Look into that. Of course he knew, right? They always say that he's playing 5D chess, which I think is very true. He understands these things. So that now he's coming out and saying that Fauci is in the pocket of China. So what is this? What are the broader implications? Because if you look at how the story has evolved, Fauci was made out to be almost like the medical messiah who'd come to save America. And so much of the world was following his advice on how we're handling things in America. He became really a global leader. People were getting, Fauci tattoos, they got Fauci books, Fauci stuffed animals, just like stupid level stuff. Even pictures of, they put Fauci on prayer candles, like the Catholic prayer candles, and on pillows. It looked like he was almost like a deity, right? Which is just, I have my own thoughts on that, the all that as well. But how is it that he's now coming, and what we're now seeing is that not only was he funding this lab, which is saying something, and there's reasons why I think that. As I get into in my analysis towards the end of this, I'll share my thoughts on that. Why was he funding this? So now we're getting into that funding, right? But also looking at now Trump coming out openly and saying that he's in the pocket of China. So what's the bigger plan behind this? Okay. Let's jump into the next story I want to show you about how when he was still president, Trump had planned a presidential commission to publicly question Fauci on funding the Wuhan lab, and also to send a bill to China for COVID-19 pandemic. So this came out June 7th. This was on DJHJ Media, which I'm not familiar with, but this is what he's saying here is that President Donald Trump wanted to bring Dr. Anthony Fauci to face a presidential commission to give evidence about funding the Wuhan laboratory suspected of leaking COVID-19. The planning for a special presidential panel had already begun. An executive order was already written, and all to hold China and its confederates and co-conspirators responsible for what they did and tally up a reparations bill to send to the Chinese Communist government. So senior advisors to the former president talked him out of doing it right before it was going to be announced, according to people familiar with the situation, that is detailed in a new book that will be released in September, exposing the origins of COVID-19, called What Really Happened in Wuhan. Now, this is interesting because in the book, there will also be another explosive revelation that U.S. officials believe that China had developed a vaccine for COVID before the outbreak that is found in an included sensitive but unclassified internal report. There's a lot of suspicious stuff adding up here. Okay, so is there a cover-up happening? Well, let's look at this. Here we have Breitbart article. This came out yesterday. WHO advisory board member, right? China's massive cover-up on coronavirus still happening. So this guy, he is a board member. He's on the advisory board of the WHO, and he came out on Fox News and said, this is a partial transcript. He said, the problem that we face here isn't the WHO or even really Dr. Fauci. The problem is the Chinese have engaged in a massive cover-up that is going on until this day, involving destroying samples, hiding records, placing a universal gag order on Chinese scientists, and imprisoning Chinese citizen journalists asking the most basic questions. This is what we need to get around. And the interviewer, Dana Perino, asked him, should the rest of the world presume that it started in a lab and then go from there, and then try to figure out a way to assume in this case that the Chinese have done this cover-up? It did start in a lab and then go from there, right? And he responds and says, I don't think we can make the presumption without a full investigation. We need to do everything possible to have a full investigation. The more that China stonewalls, the more suspicious it looks. We can't give China a veto over whether or not we investigate the world's worst pandemic in a century and do everything we can to make everyone safe. Okay, so again, what we have here is they're still stuck on the discussion of whether or not this came from a lab, right? And maybe that's just the first step that people are asking, but where is the question about was this released intentionally? right? The question, like, why are we not getting into that question? And this is what makes me think, it really shows me what I believe is how much control the CCP still has over the narrative, over the media. It's almost like, even with Fauci, again, as I've talked about before, I believe that the original plan was 8 years Obama, 8 years Hillary. Okay, it was a 16-year plan. And that I believe through my own research that COVID was originally supposed to be part of Hillary's second term, right? As something that was going to bring in the final ushering in the new global governance, right? That's what I believe was supposed to happen. Now, obviously, Trump getting in 2016, that was not part of their plan. That completely screwed their entire plan up. And so I think that what we're seeing now is we're seeing them scramble. So a lot more information has leaked out. You have, media companies like the Epoch Times that have become major players that I think in 2016, they could not have predicted that at this time there'd be so much information still coming out and that people will be stepping up so much. So, I mean, I honestly believe if Trump would not have gotten in 2016, America would, if not already have been destroyed, we would be so close to being destroyed. We'd be so close to having a global governance implemented with who knows what kinds of technocracy and control over us. And we can see it if you look at places like Canada, Australia, the UK, you can see how much they're still holding on to this. It's like, hey, the plan was we got to use this virus to implement our lockdowns and implement all of our steps to bring about the new world order, right? And it's like, well, it's not really working in America, but we're still trying, but people are seeing through this, right? And this is what you had happen in America, right? They didn't plan on this. They didn't plan on governors like Ron DeSantis or Abbott out in out in Texas, not California, I apologize. They did not plan on them opening their states up and, removing the restrictions, and people just seeing like, wow, why is it in Texas, they've had 0 deaths? Why is that happening? Right? Well, this is the beauty of America. I mean, honestly, it's, if you look at the role that America's playing, and I really believe that the founding fathers were directly guided by God in the creation of America and in writing the Constitution and all the documents that formed our country. It's almost as if they knew, or they had some insight into the role America would play at the very, very end, right? This is the end game, what I believe, of the freedom loving, God loving people, and realistically the satanic and atheistic communist cults and evil empires that have been ruling our world for a very, very long time, right? So I think that we're in the end game of that. This is the final showdown. And again, like I said, the fact that Trump got in 2016, I think that he just disrupted so many of their plans. And so we're seeing them scramble, right? So I think that what they're having to do, it's like we are understanding, we're getting more and more information coming out. So they're almost being forced to give us a little bit of information. They're being forced to maybe even sacrifice Fauci to make him one of the people they have to kind of throw to the dogs, because we know too much, and people are getting fed up with what they're doing. So they're having to release this information. But if you look at what the gentleman from the WHO advisory board is saying, that there is still a massive, massive campaign of censorship and cover up happening in mainland China, right? So what are they hiding? What are they hiding? What's behind all this? And more importantly, how is it that they're having so much support in hiding these things, right? From the politicians, but more specifically from the mainstream media. The media is the most powerful tool of either our friends or our enemies, okay? And unfortunately, the majority of the mainstream media, I believe, are under direct control of the Chinese Communist Party. And I want to share with you an article, which is basically from a book that I just ordered the book today to read, because I obviously, as you would guess, I'm highly interested in these things. But this is a Breitbart article. So Breaking the News. This is a book that was written by the editor-in-chief of Breitbart. So what this is looking at is how pro-China corporate media and left-wing activists gutted reporting on the Wuhan coronavirus. All these articles that I show, I have links in the description. I highly recommend that you take a look at some of these, especially this one. And if you really want to dive into it, I'd recommend you order this book. I'm just going to read you a little bit about this, because this is so important, because this is what is shaping the entire narrative. So here it says, as has become clear in recent weeks, the establishment media and the Silicon Valley masters of the universe were never particularly interested in doing accurate reporting on the COVID-19 pandemic. As I document in my best-selling book, Breaking the News, Exposing the Establishment Media's Hidden Deals and Secret Corruption, the press sought to turn the virus into God's gift to the left. That's Jane Fonda's terminology, not mine, pushing a narrative that we are all victims of the Trump virus and the former president's supposed incompetence. The only solution, we were told, was a massive expansion of government and more corporate control over our lives. It became clear early on in the pandemic that the pro-democratic media establishment was not going to do the bad orange president any political favors, even if it meant they would have to ignore obvious leads to the biggest news stories in decades. After all, the incentives for getting to the bottom of the origins of the virus were seemingly low for ideologically leftist reporters. If the crisis was seen as Trump's fault, it would make it all the more likely he would lose his re-election bid in November. And if the plan was to portray the outbreak as Trump's virus, it certainly couldn't be the Wuhan flu or the China virus too. So this is what's interesting. He says, perhaps more interesting, though, is that many of the newsroom and tech platforms that control the vast majority of the flow of information on the pandemic have deep financial ties to China, or would like to have them one day. So I'm not going to dig into the details of this, but I'll read a few more paragraphs. But what a lot of this book is exposing is the financial ties that the mainstream media and the leftist billionaires and big tech have to the Chinese Communist Party, and how they're basically being funded and kept alive by the Chinese Communist Party. So listen to this. Take NBC News, for example. The NBC News is part of the multinational conglomerate NBC Comcast Universal. Why would NBC News do a big expose on, say, Chinese concentration camps when there's a Universal Studios in Beijing? Or why would NBC make it clear to the readers and viewers that China is the worst human rights abuser on earth when, say, the latest movie from the Fast and the Furious franchise is set to open and Universal is handling the international distribution? Okay, so look at ABC. How about ABC News, which is owned by Walt Disney Company? Disney's business interests in China are vast, including billions of dollars in revenue from movies and theme parks. Recall that the end credits of the recent live-action remake of Mulan featured a thank you to a Chinese government security bureau linked to the Uyghur concentration camps. Now you know why. Now, Lauren Powell Jobs, the Jobs family, the Soros-esque tech heiress and multi-billionaire that funds much of America's media, from The Atlantic to Axios to Mother Jones to ProPublica and much more, derives much of her incalculable wealth from Apple and Disney, two massive businesses that have deep financial ties to China. Right? So what they're also saying here is that basically, and I'll summarize a little more instead of reading to you, is that these media companies are owned by these much bigger conglomerates that have massive business dealings in mainland China. And so, like what he's saying is, so you say Universal, so NBC, if they're doing a major deal about a big movie release in Beijing, right, in China, then do you think that China's going to be upset if their news is covering concentration camps? Or if you recall, when the live organ harvesting came out, that was back in 2006, the Epoch Times broke that story about how the Chinese Communist Party was doing live organ harvesting of probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of their own citizens. And this is something that if you go back on my live videos, I did a video about this called Body Shop. And it was an interview with a doctor that was basically forced to do live organ harvesting, right? And these are underground Christians, the Uyghurs, the Falun Gong. The Falun Gong, which if you know about them, is a massive spiritual practice that came out in the late 90s. China banned it because it was too popular, and they ended up becoming one of the greatest sources for organs for China. They're all healthy. They have them in these vast concentration in prison camps. They're all in a database. They know exactly what blood type they have. So great. If you need a liver, go pay $150,000. You get it in 2 weeks in China. What people don't realize, though, is that they're literally, upon order of that liver, they're executing a person via the organ extraction, and that's how they're getting you their liver, right? So this is China. So why are those things not being covered? Why is CNN not covering those things? Why is NBC, MSNBC? Why isn't Rachel Maddow doing an expose on Chinese concentration camps, right? I think that we now know why. But you have people like the folks at the Epoch Times that don't have corporate ties to China, right? The Gateway Pundit, they're not owned by China, right? So these are media companies that are actually reporting what's happening, right? And that's the thing, is that everyone's hiding China, and especially looking at, which is what the Breitbart article that I was sharing with you, looking at that, is that all these media, they're even hiding the coronavirus stuff. They're not looking into this. If you recall, when Trump made mention back in 2020 about the possibility that this came from a lab in Wuhan, and he was laughed off the stage. The media attacked him so much as a conspiracy theorist and all these things for even recommending it, right? So, but why? What's the bigger picture? Okay, well, what's Biden's stance on this? Let's take a look at this. This is shameful. I'll show you this article. This is shameful. Again, this is the Epoch Times. Okay. Blinken declines to say how the U.S. would hold China accountable over Wuhan lab access. So we went from Mike Pompeo to Blinken. This guy has no spine, especially as it relates to China, saying that the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken on Monday declined to disclose what the Biden administration would do to pressure the Chinese Communist Party into allowing access to the Wuhan lab where the CCP virus is thought to have originated. Quote, someone asked him, what would the U.S. actually do of substance to pressure China to give access to the lab if China does not grant that access? They asked him. He said, well, what we've seen, unfortunately, more than unfortunately, from the PRC since the beginning of this crisis is a failure to meet its basic responsibilities in terms of sharing information, providing access, and doing that in real time with transparency. This was true at the start, remains true, unfortunately, today. And I think that what you're seeing is through the work that's being done, for example, at the WHO, the work we're doing, and the concerns expressed by countries around the world, there's a strong chorus interest insisting that China make good on its commitment on its responsibilities to provide the information. He goes, basically, he's just skirting around the issue. And they're saying that, he then said he didn't want to say what the Biden administration might do in the future. So he says, quote, I don't want to get into hypotheticals going forward in the future about what we would or would not do, but I think I can say with confidence that there is going to be an increasing international demand that countries, including China, meet their responsibilities when it comes to providing information and access to transparency on local health, including COVID. So here you can see that he's dancing around the issue, and when pressed even more, he's saying that he's not even calling out China specifically. He's saying that there's going to be more of a demand that countries, including China, right, meet their responsibilities, giving us transparency on local health, including COVID. Right. So this is what the Biden administration is doing. This is the response to this. Right. So, but why? Why the weakness about this? Why is it that the mainstream media, Biden, they're taking such a weak stance, if not a supportive stance of the Chinese Communist Party? If you recall, if you go back and if you haven't watched it, I highly recommend you watch it. One of the produced videos that we put out called Red Flags. And it was talking about all the red flags that we're seeing in the White House. We put out that video shortly after Biden got in, and we saw all the things that he was doing that are just completely supporting and propping up China. Okay. So this is something that's interesting. This came out, this article I want to share with you. This was back in May. Again, it furthers what we're talking about. So Biden told service members, this was back in late May. This was, I believe it was May, I forget where, late May, that China thinks it will own America by 2035. Okay. Why is this not being discussed? Right. So President Biden, addressing the evolving landscape of foreign threats to the country, told troops on Friday that China thinks it will, quote, own America in the next 15 years. So Biden, quote, said, quote, I've spent more time with President Xi Jinping of China than any world leader has. Okay, he said for 24 hours of private meetings with just an interpreter, he's kind of bragging about how much time he spent with Xi Jinping. He told them, quote, Xi Jinping, firmly believes that China, before the year 2035, is going to own America because autocracies can make quick decisions, Biden said. Okay, so here you have Biden telling the military openly that the leader of the largest threat to the entire world, Xi Jinping, who's the largest communist country in the world, that he's telling him privately that he expects to own America by 2035. Let that sink in, right? This is what's really happening. China, this is all part of a plan for China to take over America. And as much as, you might have some friends that say, oh, China's the boogeyman. You keep saying China and the communists are after us. It's like, no, the leader of the most powerful communist nation on earth has admitted to President Biden and said that he plans on owning America in 2035. Now, what do you think Biden's response to that was? Maybe his response was like, yeah, maybe we can make it 2030. I'll pull some strings for you. Right? Thanks for taking care of my son. Right? So again, why do you think they had to get Trump out of the office? Right? Because he was the biggest person stopping this plan. And how might they have gotten Trump out of the office? Well, final article to show you before I go into my own kind of deeper analysis on things. And this is an article that I shared in the World War III live video I did. I highly recommend you watch that video. Okay, look at this. This is Epoch Times. Chinese military scientists discussed the man-made coronavirus attack years before COVID-19 pandemic. This came out in May. The fact that this didn't receive attention from every mainstream media, including Fox, who should have been covering this so deeply, it boggles my mind that this is not getting more attention, okay? So Chinese military scientists in 2015 detailed a plot to unleash a bioengineered SARS coronavirus to cause mass terror and advance the communist regime's global political ambitions. Let me read that one more time. Let's let this sink in. Chinese military scientists in 2015 detailed a plot to unleash a bioengineered SARS coronavirus to cause mass terror and advance the communist regime's global political ambitions. Okay, this is a book. It was like 261 page book. The Chinese military science theories were detailed in a 2015 book. This was first reported by the News Corp, the Australian. The scientists advocated for the weaponization of pathogens, including SARS coronaviruses, to cause terror and gain political strategic advantage. Okay. So I'm not going to dig into this. I went way more deep into this in the previous World War III episode. But what they say here is that they're saying that deploying such bioweapons would be more advantageous than using conventional warfare and military actions, the authors argued, because military moves can be traced back to the state and result in international condemnation. Genetic weapons, on the other hand, can be concealed in deployment, and it's hard finding evidence against them. This is exactly what we're going through right now, is this exact thing you're talking about, how it's hard to find evidence. It's taken more than a year for people to finally publicly recognize this might have come from a laboratory in China. But here, listen to this in the book, 2015, they wrote this, quote, "Even in the face of academic, virological, or animal evidence, one can deny, prevent someone from raising the issue, suppress possible accusations, leaving international organizations and righteous people helpless." Let that one sink in. Okay. So now, what's the bigger picture in this? This article, as I mentioned, the article about the World War III, the bioweapon, is in the description. So we have in 2015 the PLA, the People's Liberation Army in China, that published a book. Okay, they published this book, which you can buy the book. I see that Julie Lump is asking, good question, what is the source? You can purchase this book. It's literally a book that was public. The book is called "The Unnatural Origin of SARS and Genetic Weapons Based on Man-Made Viruses." Okay, and it's an Epoch Times article. That's who wrote the article covering this, which that article is in the description below. So what we have is that the other article I shared with you, I believe I shared with you that the U.S. also knew that they were doing this back in 2015. Actually, I'm not sure if I shared the article, but this book came out. Do you think that our government was unaware of this? So we know that that Xi Jinping has ambitions to basically rule the world. He has told Joe Biden that he expects for China to own America by 2035. A book published by the Chinese military in 2015 detailed exactly how a coronavirus could be used as a bioweapon for World War III, right? Actually, another quote that they say is that the authors went on to implore Chinese experts to understand and pay attention to contemporary genetic weapons for any possible future wars, including in the advent of a third world war. Okay, so what we have happening here is this big plan. Okay, now I'll share my thoughts. This is just my own beliefs on things. I've mentioned the 16-year plan. If you look at all the things that Obama did, and I'd love to do a video that's kind of diving into more about Obama and China and exposing more of those connections. But so much of what happened under Obama was so beneficial to China. They gave China keys to everything. They sold off so much land to China. There were so many things they did. Obviously, under Fauci, they're funding lab research in China, okay, to do this, with the idea being, great, Hillary's going to be in 2016. Everything is in position, right? So China was working hand in hand with our government at that time to set up the scenario for them to move in at the final moment and basically take down the most powerful nation on earth, right? So you had that, but you had Trump getting in. And again, he completely wrecked all of those plans. But those plans are still out there. They're not just going to stop those plans. So what they're doing is, I believe what we're seeing now is they've had to force the plan to accelerate these plans, right? Which I think is also, I think that the original virus was supposed to be a lot more deadly. I think that it was supposed to be much more deadly, which is why if you look at all the talking points and the narratives about it, they've had to lie about it. They've had to disguise it and say, well, why did the flu deaths disappear? All these things, because they had to still carry out their plan. But look, it was something that was rushed in China. It was put together quickly in China. Do you expect it to work right? I mean, how much else that comes out of China actually works in the long run? So again, it was something made in China that has, I think, failed in a lot of ways. But you can see that even though the actual virus has failed, I think, in what they wanted it to do, the narrative still continues. Like in Australia, it's like, oh, Victoria's going on lockdown. We've got 30 cases, or we've got 5 cases or 10 cases. It's like, this is insane. This is absolutely insane that they're still rolling with this, but they are, right? So, but I think that they had to release this because what happened in 2020? What is it that changed the entire landscape of how elections are conducted in America, right? Perhaps it was COVID. Didn't we see so many laws and everything just rush through, open up so many loopholes? Okay. So again, what I believe happened is that Obama's and Hillary were working together, developing a plan with the CCP and the people in Europe, the banking families y'all know about, the Bilderberg Group, et cetera, to implement this. Trump gets in 2016. They scramble, they freak out. They can't let that happen again. Whatever fail safes they put in place for 2016 to make sure that Trump didn't get in failed, because we, the people, actually showed up in droves and voted so strongly, right, that they failed in their plan to put their next person in. They could not let that happen again in 2020. So they had to rush out their entire plan of COVID. They had to implement that, use that as a way to create all these vulnerabilities in our democracy. I have to be careful how I talk about this, to get their own guy in place, do everything possible to keep Trump out, prevent him from getting in, go after him, impeach him, etc. Basically to roll this out. So I think this is where we are today. If you look at the media, as we talked about, the media has been absolutely complicit because they're all being funded by China. Not all, the majority of them are. And what the article is also pointing out is that when these media companies, they don't even have to be profitable, right? I think that sometimes we look and we say, oh, wait, great, CNN is losing money. Well, CNN, they don't have to make money. That's not their function. Their function, they're owned by these companies that are, say, Disney, that they're making their money somewhere else. They don't need their media company to be profitable. So that's a big thing. So that's why because they're propped up. Okay, they're getting money from China, all the other businesses, all their business interests in China. So you have all these things working in conjunction to basically to overturn America, to get it ready with the support of Mr. Biden, to get it ready to hand over to China by 2035. Okay. Now this is the bigger question. This is the bigger thing, right? Is with the book that they've written, and this is what I'm talking about in this show. This is the theme. Why is no one asking about that? Why is the discussion still, well, it looks like Fauci's, may have done research. He may have funded research down in Wuhan. Why is the discussion not, wait, why did the Chinese military publish a book in 2015 about how World War III could be brought about by a genetically engineered coronavirus? Why is that not being talked about, right? Because, again, it shows you, even Fox News, you saw how they played Arizona on election night. They are what you would call controlled opposition. They're doing a good job reporting on a lot of things, but fundamentally, they are still part of the controlled opposition, as we saw on November 3rd, right? Why is Wallace still with them? Okay, that you can see there's so many things about this that you can see all the holes. Okay, so now we see where we're at now. Now we see what is the true story. Is this about Fauci? No, like I said, Fauci he's a pawn. They're going to sacrifice him as they need to. If they can pin all this on Fauci and leave the story at this is, I think, what they're working on. They're trying to leave the story at, yes, this might have leaked out accidentally from a lab, but Fauci was the one that was funding it. Let's take him, let's put him behind bars and make everyone else happy. Okay. Instead of looking at Fauci doesn't matter. He's a low level pawn. He does not matter. Let's instead look at why did the virus come out? Why was it done intentionally? What is the planning behind this, right? What's the timing of it? Everything. Okay. That's where the discussion needs to be hitting, is how does this tie back to the Chinese Communist Party? Why is Xi Jinping telling our president, God, our, the geriatric in charge, why is she telling him that by 2035 he wants to own the United States? Okay, this is where the discussion needs to be happening. And this is the thing, is that, look, I think that a lot of what our mission is as digital soldiers, as patriots, as freedom-loving Americans, is we have to really help our fellow Americans see the true story behind this. Because even, friends that I've talked to that, that voted for Biden, when I talk to them and I say, look, let's talk about China. Let's talk about the country. Like, do you want, like, I have to ask, it's like, would you rather have Trump in charge or China in charge? Do you care about Black lives? Okay, how are they treated in China? Do you care about women's rights? Okay, how about forced abortions in China once you move past the number of children that you're going to have, right? Do you care about the Muslims? Okay, look how they've been treated in China. It's like, do you want that? Because this is what Trump was up against. Trump was fighting so hard to protect us from China. And if you saw the Plot to Steal America, the original video I put out back in December, which is still up on YouTube, which is amazing, I recommend go watching it again, because it's really framing how China was the one that was going up against, or sorry, Trump was the one that was fighting against China, right? And that's what they feared. That's why they had to get him out of here. That's why they had to push the release of COVID, all these things to take over what was happening in November to get him out of here. But now this is a very kind of gloomy way of looking at things. It's like, oh, well, okay, great. The Chinese Communist Party has this great plan with support from Biden and everything, and they're going to be owning America by 2035. Well, that's their plan. But what Trump initiated in 2016, the MAGA movement, what I'm doing, what you're doing, all the channels that are out there exposing these people and showing the truth, they did not plan for these things. Media like the Epoch Times, Gateway Pundit, Just the News, all these people that are out there exposing the truth of this, they did not anticipate this. And this is what gives me so much hope, because their narrative is crumbling. And even if, again, as I asked in the Fauci Fall Guy show, what are they hiding? What are they distracting us from? Why the Fauci email stuff, right? Because of the audits. The audits are very, very important. And the information that's going to come out in these audits, I think it has the potential to overturn everything. And they're so scared of that, which is why they're scrambling. They're almost like they're like a chicken with their head cut off. They're frantic. The media is frantic. They're no longer caring about whether they get caught in their own lies. Look at what's happening on the border. Look at, like, everyone is seeing through these things. You see. I've shared them a few times on the Telegram, but you see that the people putting out the big banners at the baseball game saying, Trump won. These big banners that they're hanging at the baseball games. People they're knowing the truth. And because I think that what happened is that even though they had all these plans in 2016, when Trump got in, he derailed everything. And so now the patriots, all of us, you watching, yes, you are doing things that are counteracting this, and you're helping save our country from China. And on the flip side of this, China is so weak. And this is, again, this is also why they are being so aggressive and so erratic with their actions and so sloppy with their actions, because they're very weak. China, it's the greatest military strategist of all time, in my opinion, Sun Tzu, The Art of War, right? When you're weak, act strong. When you're strong, act weak. Okay, Trump, he's quiet. He's sitting back. He's letting things happen. I believe that he is very, very strong in what he's doing. Whereas look at China. China, they're beating their chest and they're showing off their military and they're, kind of saying how strong that they are, but they're actually very, very weak. The internal fracturing of the Chinese Communist Party, the quit the CCP movement that's happened, of people just renouncing their memberships to the Chinese Party. There's all these things that are happening that have weakened China. And fundamentally, I believe that China as an atheist country, as a communist country, they hate God. Why are they attacking God so much? Why are they attacking Christians so much? Because that's their weakness. And so how Americans are responding is we're coming together. I was at the event, God and Country, right? So the people that are coming together to fight this, we're going back to the roots of what America is. We're going back to what our founding fathers are. We're reviving that spirit of 1776 that say, look, we are one nation under God. And the more we can bring that back into our country, that's China's weakness. I believe that China has done deals with Satan. I believe that Satan is working through China, everything that they're doing. As much as we thought that the globalists were in control, I actually believe that the Chinese Communist Party has taken control. If you call the whole thing a dragon or a snake, China is the head of it. And that's what they've done. But as I mentioned, fundamentally, though, they're weak. They're on the verge of collapse. And their attempts to take over America and to do this are feeble. They will not succeed. The Patriots are too strong. We have people like Ron DeSantis, Abbott, I think he's more of a rhino, but he's still doing good things. Trump endorsed him. He's stepping up in a lot of ways, right? We're armed to the teeth. We're armed with our Bibles, our faith, and the Chinese Communist Party, they can't overcome this. So fundamentally, yes, am I worried about the state of our country? Absolutely. I wanted Trump to be sitting in the White House right now. But do I think there's a lot of really, really good things that are happening? I really do. And I'm genuinely optimistic, and I feel positive about the future of our country because, like I said, so many people are waking up. So many people are seeing through the lies. They're turning off mainstream media, and they're finding the truth. And I think that this is the one thing that communist regimes fear, is that they have only been able to succeed when they can have a giant lie to take over the population until they're in control, and then it doesn't really matter. But they're not able to do that with the Americans. They've also only been able to overtake countries that were not armed. Again, our founding fathers, Second Amendment, why do you think they're attacking it so much? Because I think there's probably, 300 to 400 million, if not more now, it's just shooting up privately owned guns in America. Do you think they're going to take all those guns away? No. So they're scared and they're weak and they're trying to find, it's like a parasite. They're trying to latch on to whatever they can to survive. And it just so happens to be that that's America, but we're not going to let them. So, gosh, it's been over an hour. It's 1:03. I've talked a lot. Gosh, thank you, everyone. I think I should wrap up here, though I could keep going, and maybe eventually I'll be doing 2-hour live shows, and if you're still awake at the end. But thank you, everybody. Again, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for coming on. A lot of you are setting aside an hour of the middle of your day to come on and watch this show with me, and I truly appreciate that. I really do believe, as I mentioned, that there's so much hope. I believe that we have so much strength. I think fundamentally that God wins. Like, don't forget, God kicked Satan out of heaven. Satan's down here causing all this ruckus on earth, but he's not in control. He's being allowed to do that. And we are the ones that are, I think, really on the forefront of doing this. And I really hope that, because I believe that we are at a time where our actions today will potentially decide the fate of our souls. And I think that we're in that kind of a time. And so I think that, and this is part of one of the things that I want to continue to try to do with this show, is that I want to be able to create a platform and a show that maybe some of your friends are more liberal, that you can show them this and you can say, hey, just take a look at this with me. Let's watch this with me. I think that a lot of people, a lot of the conservative talk shows, they have great information, but sometimes they get a little bit angry and they get agitated and upset. And how I look at it is, like, when I look at what's happening with the radical left, I feel bad for them. Like, honestly, like, I want to cry when I watch a lot of what's happening. These people have just been led astray. They've been deceived. They've been Satan has implanted himself in the media and Hollywood, and especially the younger generations. They don't know any better. right? I see these people with half their heads shaved and blue hair and weird piercings, and they hate Trump, and they're atheist and whatnot. I feel so bad for them. So I really want to be able to create a show that we can talk to them, because the more of these people that we can help to wake up, the more of these people that we can help to see the truth of what's happening, maybe that's going to help potentially change the eternal fate of their soul, for them to actually realize that, wow, Satan is really strong in this world, and I'm going to start rejecting Satan. Um, Again, that's why I want to try to play my role in doing that. So again, thank you everybody for coming on here. I appreciate it so much, and I'm gonna keep going stronger. I've got some big things in the works I won't get into today, but I'm gonna keep going. And again, thanks for everyone's support. Thank you for sharing. If you haven't yet, just a quick reminder to hit the like button. Share the content if you can with your friends or family. If you're watching on Facebook, share it on Facebook. Somehow we get a lot of viewers still on Facebook, which is great, because somehow I've managed to bypass a lot of the censorship and still get this message out. So I think that maybe God is looking over us for us to do these things. So, and again, follow me if you aren't, follow me on Telegram, on Safe Chat, and I will be back again on Thursday. Right now, it's every Tuesday and Thursday at noon Eastern time. So I look forward to seeing you all again on Thursday. Have a wonderful day and take care. And yeah, I will see you at a later time. So in the meantime, take care of yourselves, take care of your families, and just keep your heads up, because we are winning and God wins. Thank you.